Association and to the second Forms of Inquiry event. Tonight's talk will be followed by a talk by Radim Pesco and James Goggin on the 24th of October, and by Paul Elliman on the 26th of October in this lecture hall. My name is Zach Kais. I'm the art director of the AA Print Studio and have worked over the past months with a team at the AA, the Print Studio, and AA Exhibitions to curate the Forms of Inquiry exhibition and the publication with Mark Owens. We're thrilled to use the context of Forms of Inquiry which explores the relationship of architecture and graphic design as an opportunity to be joined by Urs Lenny, Lex Trube, Jonathan Hares, and Laurent Benner, and technology permitting, Jörg Lenny from the Yale School of Art in New York. All of these designers are working in, out of, and around Switzerland. And for this privilege, we would like to thank Haya Lang and Dennis Cherie from the Swiss Embassy, the Swiss Culture Fund in Britain, and Pro Helvetia, both for their support of Forms of Inquiry and tonight's talk. As many of you know, Switzerland is a country that has enjoyed a long-standing and well-documented relationship with print culture, craftsmanship, and modern graphic and typographic design. The federal support of graphic design has led to the world's first professionally designed passport and also competition to design the Swiss currency, which is perhaps a good reason to stay outside of the EU. The intention of tonight's talk is not to identify anything quintessentially Swiss in graphic design, but rather to put some of its most interesting practitioners into conversation. So, it looks like Jörg is not online yet. So, in that event, I guess we will go with Urs and Lex first. Everyone will present 10 minutes or 15 minutes at a time. And if Jörg pops up, then we'll adjust plans.
Okay. When we got invited for this, we thought of a project that is suitable to show, and mostly we work on books, one could say, but we decided to show something else, which is a project that is more process-based and also an ongoing thing, rather something experimental than just one piece. It is a kind of an identity that we were commissioned to do for an exhibition space in Hamburg. The space is not in Hamburg city itself, it's a bit outside. It's on the south side of Hamburg, divided by a little a 15 minutes train ride and a little piece of green landscape. You will come to this station, which is already in a rather it's in the suburbs. It looks rather picturesque. It's not in an urban environment anymore, and we got commissioned now, I think something more than a year ago, from a guy who got the new director of this exhibition space. He was living in Zurich, I think 15 years ago, so he knew a bit of the scene and the people. And he thought, since he has so many friends that are unemployed graphic designers, he could not give the job to one of them because it would have meant that they got in a fight over the thing. So he decided to give it abroad, and somehow came across our work and asked if he could do this. We then went on a trip to Hamburg-Harburg to have a look at this site to see if this could be something of our interest, and we found this kind of suburbia train station, but it's a historic building. It was kind of lively, but then kind of hidden on the first floor, really hard to find, is this huge exhibition space. It was the former first-class waiting hall of the station, and in a way we like the absurdity or the clash of those two worlds coming together, because actually nobody really can find the entrance to this exhibition space. And formerly the program that was done there was also rather, one could say, traditional, lots of painting. And now with this new director, it was clear that it's going to be like a new direction. He was going to show contemporary art, which was for some of the space is run by an association, and I think for some of the members of this association, it was hard to face this new program. So what we saw there in the first place was his plan for for 2 years. He thought that he could kind of establish a program for the 2 years already, and make it transparent to the visitors of the space what he will be doing in those 2 years. He chose like very global topics as work, money, power, love, sex, freedom, and future. So this was one of the first things we saw there on the wall. He had just begun his work. It was nothing there already, and he couldn't tell us much more than this is what I will do. Then one second thing we found was the only picture hanging in there. First, we thought it could be a piece of concept art, but on closer looking, it was the sign the sign that marks that this building is under cultural heritage, I think you say. It was protected, and so this made us think of the relation between the building and this exhibition space. So apparently both deal with culture in a way, but then again they don't have something in common. That the exhibition space is somehow cut off from the rest of this building, and this somehow made a strong impression on us. And the second thing that made the same impression was this hat, which somehow is the preferred hat of the new curator that he's always wearing. And when he came there from Hamburg, he soonly was known as the man with the neon green hat. Even in the local newspaper there was an article on him referring to this hat. So this is, and then this is something else that popped up during research. I mean, all what we're telling here is kind of we're trying to illustrate probably a mode of how we sometimes work, or how we try to collect material and then try to make something out of it. What was interesting here is those two heraldic signs. The one shows the flag of Hamburg and the other one of Harburg, which are both castles. And what we came up with in the first place, or what was the first little experiment for the identity for this place, was a fusion between this sign for cultural heritage and the director's neon green cap. So we tried to make a new sign that kind of merges those two worlds. we thought of this not really as a logo, or it was more something to play with, that one could apply as a singular thing, but also as a pattern on walls, on architecture. We thought of hanging two big flags in the main hall of the station. And we thought of it as something that just should be visible around the station and pop up every now and then, and suddenly people would start to make a connection between this thing and the exhibition space. Also, we thought that we could start to play with just these colors as a more subliminal reference to this hat. So up there you see the entrance, but it has no sign. It's not marked as a museum or anything. You wouldn't go in there. You just walk by. As this sign was a bit, one could say, cryptic or not understandable for somebody who doesn't know the context, we had to come up also with something that really communicates the name of this institution a bit more direct. And sorry.
That's changed.
Oh, that's changed.
Yeah, this is maybe another problem was maybe the distance between Zurich and Hamburg, which is if working on a low budget project, it was already a problem to go there, and be once there wouldn't. Yeah, we just had to decide quite quickly what to do, and then we also had a bit the fear that it would end up in a bit of a mess. Like if we would have too much to deal with them, like just knowing that they're working quite chaotic. And so we had in mind to come up with something which we actually could just send to Hamburg and kind of made even templates or just some system they could kind of use themselves. And another idea was maybe even production-wise not to leave the printer kind of in the chain, and maybe let them produce their stuff themselves. And so we had the idea of having this just endless paper which they could use for everything from business cards to posters, and just let it run through a printer. So we researched for a printer which could kind of manage this, which we actually didn't found, but we found something quite close to it, which would be an office printer which also can print banners up to 1 meter.
The thing was also that they didn't have budget for sending material to the printer, but they had budget to buy office material for their space. So they didn't have a scanner, they didn't have a fax machine. So we were looking for some kind of workaround to give them the scanner and the fax machine, but also the printer that could use themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what we were trying to say before, that we needed a type of wording or something that communicates the institution's name a bit more directly. And since the name is such a long chain of letters, we were saying that we rather would emphasize the longness of it than hide it in a short thing. So we this was also in relation to what we see here. This is the name of the name of the series and the titles of the exhibitions.
The content.
Basically the content what he will try to do there in his 2 years. So what we came up with based on this banner printer and on this long name, we produced this paper for him. This shows 9 A4 papers, the back side and the front side, and it is perforated in the whole length, and then down to A4, and then down to A5, and then down to A6. So what we thought is that we provide them
with a system or a tool that they could use in Hamburg, then we would just send them over PDFs or even InDesign files where they could fill in the texts themselves, because as it normally goes, texts change until the last second before something needs to go to print, and we just were looking for a system to get hold of this problem. So what you saw there was the first
Invitation card.
invitation cards. This was what we call the poster. It's due to this strange machine, it also has a strange format, and it catches your eye because it's something you normally don't see, this weird long format. These are flyers, business cards. Basically, this was kind of the first try, or like a pilot, one could say. And we were thinking that they could really use this paper for all their printed matter. So this first exhibition happened. This was how it looked like on the topic of work. And as we thought, I mean, this first attempt to work with this machine was full of problems, of course. We were thinking of it as a low budget solution, but then again, toner was always low. They had to buy, I don't know, 10 or 15 new cartridges, every other day, and it was not that low budget in the end anymore, and also not so easy going as we planned it. But still, we thought the system in a way is working, and we now are altering it. Now what we see here are the papers for the next few exhibitions. So we thought of always changing the colors from exhibition to exhibition. These were invitation cards for the next two exhibitions that took place. One thing one could also mention is that they also can use it for distribution through post, so they can fold it down to A6 and it fits in a really small envelope, so they can send it for lower fees. And it was all design decisions somehow based on the search of a workaround for a problem that was popped up due to the circumstances of the distance and of the money. These are that size. That's the poster for the exhibition that's going to happen next, and this is probably in print just right now. Someone in Hamburg is shifting long papers into his machine. And this was actually the first picture that we got sent after they managed to really produce something for the first time.
Yeah, that's about it for the moment.
We thought of more proposing this as a kind of as a work method that probably could also be the basis for a discussion or for question after the other talks.
All right. So we now have Jörg Lenny with us from New York at Yale School of Art, where he's doing a workshop. Can you hear me, Jörg?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
It's New Haven, though.
Yes, exactly.
Hello, Urs. Urs is Alex. I can see a bottle of mineral water there.
So the way this will work is you can now go ahead and we can show extra videos from your forms of inquiry contribution, and then also read them.
This is an experiment in new media then. So am I on the screen now? I don't see. Okay. Sorry?
Go ahead.
Okay. Also, yeah. So yeah, before I start talking about the Hector piece at the AA, I want to quickly say something about the backdrop here. This one. So this is a poster that students painted onto the wall for my workshop, and then Hector was used to correct that. So Franke's name was added since we give the workshop together, and then both our names were crossed out, and Hector's name was written over it. There you go. And this was a sort of an instructional presentation to the students, because we're opening up the platform to them, and they're going to make their own experiments with it. Anyway, should we start the movie? Do I get through it all? This is it. I can hardly see anything. Okay, so this was a week ago now, I think, in the gallery you're probably standing in right now, or next to it. So for the feedback. For the contribution to the show, Forms of Inquiry, I was using Hector to look at patterns used in architectural drawings to represent materials. And these patterns were then realized in a series of, as an event, as a production during the show, onto paper. But the pattern were going beyond the size of the paper, so a part of it would actually end up on the wall, and they would mix there, while as on the paper the pattern would not mix. So in the end we would have 8 papers as a sort of a swatch list for various architectural drawings, and these could be used on a bigger scale. At the same time, or before that, Hector was drawing the legend to these posters, the reading room, which you can see when you go upstairs. So these two pieces are related. This is absurd. I'm talking to new people. Should I say more about it? Yeah, maybe, yeah, that would be. Okay, so yeah, Hector, that's easier. So, yeah, Hector was a reaction, or was a comment on an observation I have made when I studied at EGAL in Lausanne, at the graphic design school. And while studying there, I realized that tools, computers, printers, etc., had maybe back then even more, not quite a strong impact on the work of people or what they do with it, and often people were not so aware of that. And so I made 2 projects. One was Scriptographer, and the other one was Hector, and both were such a comment. Like Scriptographer is a plugin for Illustrator that plugs into that closed software that a lot of graphic designers use, and that gives the possibility to open that up, to add new functionality through an easy scripting language, and to not be like kind of trapped in that software. And I mean, it's basically just a statement about the software and how we use it, how we work with computers, and also a trial to get a modular way of thinking about computers more into the everyday work of also designers. And then Hector, in a way, was then a continuation of that idea, but thinking about the output device instead of the software. So my idea was to replace the default output device with something more characteristic with a more kind of manual expression, a machine that is almost like a person. So that's also why I got a name and not just a, I don't know, a number or a descriptive name of what it does. So to help people to understand it in that way. And then when it was made together with Uli Franke, the engineer, after we made it, we actually realized that it was much more than we actually thought of when we made it, because it had this whole performance aspect. The moment of the drawing being made became important and was explored in a lot of exhibitions. And maybe this example now is maybe not such a good one because it's very... yes? Go to Rita. Okay. Yeah, that connects nicely to it. So this is then, in a way, a continuation of that idea of a machine that uses the narrative qualities of drawings. So after having made Hector and used it a lot, I was interested in a machine that would automate this more, that would kind of instrumentalize drawing as a means of communication or as a technique for animation as well. So the difference between Hector and Rita is that Rita is much more autonomous and can work on its own. It doesn't need to be assisted. It can change its color. It can also wipe off. It can take different tools. It can use a sponge and then erase either the whole drawing or just parts of it. And by being able to do so, it provides this possibility to kind of make an endlessly changing surface that uses drawing as the means of communication, so to say. And the idea for this is always to be that it is kind of in relation to an architecture, to a building, that it would be installed, attached to a building, and then used as a communication device from the inside. It would grow from the inside towards the glass that is then seen from the outside. People who walk by could either stop and watch, or they could be attracted by it and go inside. And also it could be used both as a way for announcements for that house, for that building. For example, if it is an art institution, it could announce things going on, movie projections or lectures, openings, etc. But then it could also be used as its own exhibition surface or space, so where artists could be commissioned to come up with drawings for it. Yeah. So this was for the exhibition Rita plus Hector in Sweden in the Tensta Konsthall 2 years ago, 2005, and in a way, the way it is shown here, not really how it was planned, since it is shown in the middle of this white cube situation. And it has its own glass that had to be installed in order to be able to operate onto something. Oh, now I don't see you anymore. Okay. In a way, that's not how I plan it to be shown, because for me it is really something that works in relation to the building. And a bit like Scriptographer lives within Illustrator, Rita should be attached to an existing architecture and kind of draw onto it. So, but permanently it will be installed for a while, because it's quite a complicated thing to move. So, yeah, and when it was done for this show, it was actually built for permanent installation, and then plans have changed. And now it ended up in a show, and ever since it is in storage. So, if anyone there knows, with the advertisement, I have to stop that. All right.
evening. Maybe while we're setting up, I just introduce the background of the project. For the past 63 years or so, there has been an annual book prize that is given in Switzerland. It's the Office for Culture in Switzerland furthers with that prize the manufacturing of books, the industry that stands behind it, and the designers that are involved in it. To design the catalogue to show all these books, it's a mandate that's normally given for 3 years. So John and I have been collaborating on it for the past 3 years. Normally per year, about 30 books gets awarded with the title The Most Beautiful Swiss Book, or being part of the exhibition The Most Beautiful Swiss Books. And before we got this mandate, Miriam Fisher, who is looking after this project every year, Cornel Windlin and then Norm have been designing these books for 3 years each. So when I initially received the commission, I was a bit frightened. These are two heavyweights of Swiss graphic design, and there I sort of had to step into the same arena, and I was a bit worried to be measured against those heavyweights, sort of on a design basis. Here you see one of Norm's catalogues, which I really like. Is it possible to get a bit more light on the? All right. So basically, the job is to celebrate 30 odd books within a book, which is a sort of an odd commission at first. So traditionally, to show books in a book, you photograph them, which Norm has done here, Manuel and Dimitri from Norm. And we very much enjoyed these catalogues that they produce. They come sort of in 2 parts. They fold out like this, and are put together in this plastic map. A few years ago, I had been working at the studio with Cornel Windlin while he was working on the previous 3 books to this series by Norm. And in those days, printers would keep printing plates in case of a rerun of a project. And that sort of struck me, and I liked sort of the aspect of the economy in that you don't throw away the films you used to what's the word?
Recycle.
And the films and the plates that you use for printing, that you don't throw them away, you keep them at least for a year in case there's a rerun. So I was thinking, well, of all the books that win this award, somewhere at some printer there is all the plates for these books. They are being kept. So by the time we started, like, that was 3 years ago in 2004, printers wouldn't keep printing plates anymore, but the files would be still around. Printing plates are now recycled, so it's equally economical. So based on the idea that once the job arrives to celebrate 30 books and all the materials still being at printers, we had this idea of basically not designing our own catalogue, but to get in touch with all those printers and ask them to reprint 8 pages of their winning entry. So here you have quite a big, large format book, which basically is the size is derived from the most standard printing sheet that printers use. It comes as a raw book block. we wanted to underline the material aspects of books, like their paper, how they feel, their weight, and so forth. So the first book in the out of the 3 books I redesigned is a naked book block, so to speak. So if I jump somewhere into the book, I need something with more color. Right. So here on the left-hand page, you have the 8th page of a section that was reprinted for our project. So here you have 8 pages out of a book that has won the award. It clashes here with another entry that again you have 8 pages printed onto the original stock by the printer who initially printed the book. This is sort of a very remote way of designing a book. Basically, it was more a question of getting everyone involved. There was, at the beginning, before we did this, no book had ever been made with 25 printers. For the graphic designers in here, you know, normally you have enough worries with 1 printer, and then suddenly we had to do this project with about 25 printers. So there was a lot of communication to be done. Basically the work moved away from designing the book to actually doing a logistical, it was more a logistical task. So by getting 8 pages from each book after the other, you have the entries from these 30 books just clashing. So you get a clash of layout, a clash of material, and a clash of printing technique.
I think one of the things that was interesting here, that it shouldn't be underestimated, that the amount of work taken to logistically organise that many printers to produce the book, each part of the book, in time to reach the binder, with so much logistical work for Laurent, speaking in 2 or 3 languages, to printers from as far as Lebanon, the States and Holland, that the notion of work that graphic designers often struggle with, that they should do more work and they should be more involved, was kind of knocked back because there was so much other stuff to do that the actual graphic design elements for this book became less important. They were sort of transposed by this other notion of work, and that of organising this project to happen.
So here it goes from a fairly thin paper to a project that has been silk screened on a much weightier paper. So the challenge here was to talk to the screen printer and get him to support the project. Often it was like getting people to help us. During this commission you are given a print budget, and normally with that you go shop around and see what you get from a selection of printers. Here we took that print budget and divided it by 30 and approached the printer, said, look, that's what we can pay. This is a fantastic opportunity. You can show off your printing again, and it will be there in its sort of original state. So I just continue here a little bit. Here again, one section stops, a new one starts. That's a photographic book. And in the first year we concentrated on reproducing everything one-to-one as much as possible, especially with the binding as well. So this is an entry that was originally bound, I don't know if you can see that, that's a Japanese binding. So we worked closely with the bookbinder to reproduce all the facets and aspects of each book. And there is, later on, there is an entry which is on newsprint, which is one of my favorite moments in this catalog, when you get to this and you have a very thin stock. This was done by both of you, is that right, or by Lex? Yeah. So basically, in these books, you have Lex's and also Urs's work, or in the catalogs that we show in a minute. This is Sony. They paid a small sum. This was an entry from a printer in Lebanon, who eventually then featured on the invites card for the evening. Here he is. He's a fantastically enjoyable person to work with. It was very difficult. His French was okay, my French was okay, but then suddenly you talk about printing. You call someone up in Lebanon and you say, print 8 pages again, ship them over. It needs to be cut like this, or it needs to be uncut, in fact. And I had such good fun with him on the phone that I asked him, we sent him a PDF of the diploma that he will receive, which is up here. So I sent him the PDF, said, please print this out, sign it yourself, doesn't matter, stick it on the wall and ask a colleague of yours to photograph it. And he did that, and it just came out brilliantly. So we're very chuffed with Youssef Joujou from Lebanon. So basically, in the run-up to this project, some people had heard what we were doing, and I was said by some people in Switzerland, look, this is just asking for trouble, this is not going to happen. And we were, when it was there, it was quite impressive thing. It somehow we cheated our way through. We worked with 25 printers out of 30 entries, and everyone started to ask, well, what are you going to do next year? Because after having this, people were very curious what was to follow.
So here's book number 2. So this was kind of the difficult second album. The first book was very well received, and it was this kind of huge, big object, and it looked very unlike any of the catalogues that had come before it in the series. It was this much rawer object, and it was much more concept driven. So we talked quite a lot about whether that original idea should be repeated for the next 2 years. I mean, it would by the nature of the way it was done, it would always be different. You'd always have different papers, you'd always have different printers. But I think then in the end we sort of decided that we'd learned so much from the first year that it would be good to take that knowledge and move forward with a new concept. And we became sort of slightly sort of obsessive about print logic, the notion of the amount of pages you can print on an 8-page sheet, and how we could use that structure to make the best book we could. So one night in a pub, we finally decided that it would be great to use every single page from an 8-page print sheet from every book. So this second book, this is kind of a hard concept to explain, and no one really understands it.
Yeah.
Would you
Well, the first book was so complex in terms of its binding that we say, right, that's it.
Simple one.
We're going to make it A4, we're going to glue it together, no worries, it's going to be beautifully easy and under budget. And the book binder quoted misquoted quite dearly, but basically we kept this concept of working with the printers and printing onto the original stock. In order to do that, we also spoke to all the Swiss paper manufacturers, and they all say, "Oh, fantastic! Our products live as they are in this celebratory context." So decided to make it very simple. It got a lot more complex, but the second book, we had the idea of looking at a book almost like in an exploded drawing. If you explode all the elements out that make a book, the typefaces, the photography, the binding, the paper, and so forth. And for each of the 30 books, we then, I'm just going to go through it. Right. It starts showing the books as they are, with sort of neighbors for scale. I'm just going to whiz through this. This one was also printed in 4 different countries, like the first one.
So we're thinking that each book has one print job. On that one print job, you get 8 pages. So each book was photographed. So the photograph of the book was printed in the same way that the book was printed. And then from these sheets, we then had each page cut out and then collated by a ginormous sort of sucking machine that reordered the book back into itself. So first you see the book printed in its technique on its own paper. Then the next time you see a winning book, it's its real page. So that's basically what we've done.
Yeah.
What we've done in the first year.
So basically, here you have the photograph of a winning entry, and later on in the book, on the same paper again, you have an original page from the book. So here we cut down, and we only have 1 page per winning book. Again, the paper's coming together beautifully, and different printing techniques. In order to say a little thank you to the paper people who had supported the project, we decided to have one section with only showing the paper and its name, which for you yeah, which you don't see, but basically 1/4 of this catalogue is a paper sampler. So again, showing one of the elements that constitutes these books in its untouched state, so to speak. It's much easier to look at a paper and feel it when it's unprinted. So there we have this meditative section in our book number 2. And it goes on and then gives you finally the typefaces used within the books that have won. So basically it's a catalogue, something to look up, elements of all the winning entries.
Out of all 3 catalogues, this has been probably the most sort of enduring with other designers, and it kind of acted as this kind of nice, simple reference tool, and sort of had a longer shelf life, whereas in the other 2 are a bit sort of larger and more sculptural, but this one you often see on people's desks.
So basically, I mean, I have to point out again, we're not showing you our own work. This is showing again work that other people have done, and kind of bringing it together in an interesting form. We started with that raw book block that we showed earlier, and then went up in sort of binding terms to a brochure, which is a glue-bound catalogue. 3rd year came, and we wanted to sort of, it was the obvious thing to do, to then end up with a hard case cover, the sort of the Rolls-Royce of bookmaking, inset image, embossing, and so forth. Again, John and I, we've talked a lot about how can we now what can we do of the number 2, and we worked actually with Jörg, who you just saw on screen, and he's a very clever fella, and he programmed us a handy tool that allowed us to show every page from every book. So imagine you have this, I'm just going to go through the beginning of the book while I talk. Through now PDF technology being omnipresent in bookmaking and in book design, we were thinking if we can get hold of the original printing sheets for each book, we then can actually show a whole book in its entirety. So what you get here is the overview on 8 pages, again printed on the original stock of a book. So you have every single page in there, and then again one original page.
John, I'm going to speed you ahead. We're
Oh yeah.
running
Okay.
So do you want to show just a bit more about the book and
Yeah.
then do questions?
So the notion here was that the bigger the book, the bigger the winning book, the smaller the thumbnails were. So there was one book that
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
had over 2,000 pages, and there were some books that came in at 16 or 32. So obviously the shorter the book, the bigger the thumbnail, and the bigger the Sony logo.
So being able to place these spreads, is that something that you said Jörg worked with you on?
Yeah, I mean here we have this, I don't know if you can see it, there is like 2,000 images placed in picture boxes, which normally in graphic design land means you import it with by hand. So we didn't really fancy doing that, so we worked with Jörg to automate this part of the project. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Alright.
Again, this
I
was
am
like
Yeah, maybe end with maybe we end here with the last invitation for the exhibition, which was we asked all the printers again. We just kind of tried to collect material rather than produce it ourselves, and we asked everyone for test images they use for testing the profiles, and this was a very fantastic one. I don't know if you can see. And sort of finishing our series of invites with always having a face and a person on there. I think we're going to stop here. Thank you.
I think we can take a few questions, one or two, but before we do that, I had a question. The three projects that we saw tonight all in a way take up the material process as a way to kind of create form, like with what you showed with the print workshop. In a way, installed within the gallery, Hector as a kind of dirty printing, and then the Most Beautiful Swiss Book, which uses the kind of print technology as a kind of methodology. So Annie, do you want to comment on how you sort of explore the processes that you're limited to?
I mean, I think with the Swiss book, this was like a gift. I think this is a very site-specific book. It can only be realised under certain conditions and certain circumstances, with a fantastic client, with a fantastic resource base. So in that sense, it just kind of really lent itself to being materialised, this work. I mean, it wouldn't work. It wasn't,
Yeah, well, I think the parallel that I drew to Urs and Lex is that they worked sort of remotely. I mean, I didn't know this project. I just saw that today, and often I think graphic design becomes more interesting for the designer and I think the end user. If you had to work around something, if objects feel different if they had to be done in Zurich and then a system had to be put in place for someone in Hamburg or near Hamburg to then execute it, and that sort of informs the end product, which I think which then becomes a strength of a design. I mean, we worked in a similar way. I mean, we took ourselves back as designers, but then just following certain the logic of print of bookmaking. I think then these books became much more interesting because actually our voice wasn't, or something else had influenced
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Couldn't have.
So, do we have any questions from the audience? There's a roving microphone. If you have a question. Any questions? None? Okay. Well, we're running behind schedule, so if